She was running late, he was standing firm. But when the gate closed, neither of them realized their worlds were about to collide in the most unexpected way. The bustling airport terminal was alive with the usual chaos of travelers rushing to their gates, announcements blaring over the intercom, and the hum of conversations filling the air. Among the crowd was Clara Bennett, a poised woman in her early 40s, dressed in a sharp navy blue pantsuit. She glanced at her watch, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she hurried toward the security checkpoint. Her flight to Chicago was scheduled to depart in 45 minutes, and she was cutting it close. Clara had just flown in from London, where she had been wrapping up her role as the regional operations director for a major airline. Today was her first day as the new airport director for one of the busiest airports in the US. Though no one at the airport knew her yet, she had planned to arrive early, but her connecting flight had been delayed due to weather, leaving her with barely enough time to make her next flight. As she approached the gate, she saw the boarding door closing. Her heart sank. She quickened her pace, weaving through the crowd, and reached the gate just as the airline staff was about to shut the door. The airport terminal was a hive of activity, with travelers rushing to their gates, announcements blaring over the intercom, and the hum of conversations filling the air. Among the chaos, Clara Bennett moved with purpose, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she hurried toward the security checkpoint. Her flight to Chicago was scheduled to depart in 45 minutes, and she was cutting it close. Clara had just flown in from London, where she had been wrapping up her role as the regional operations director for a major airline. Today was her first day as the new airport director for one of the busiest airports in the US, though no one at the airport knew her yet. She had planned to arrive early, but her connecting flight had been delayed due to weather, leaving her with barely enough time to make her next flight. As she approached the gate, she saw the boarding door closing. Her heart sank. She quickened her pace, weaving through the crowd, and reached the gate just as the airline staff was about to shut the door. "Wait, please, I need to board this flight," Clara called out, slightly out of breath. The gate agent, a young man in his late 20s, glanced at her with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but boarding has closed. The plane is about to push back." Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. "But I have an important meeting in Chicago. I can't miss this flight." Before the gate agent could respond, a stern voice interrupted. "Ma'am, rules are rules. If you're late, you're late." Clara turned to see Mark Thompson, the airport manager, standing nearby. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with a no-nonsense demeanor. He had been with the airport for over 2 decades and prided himself on running a tight ship. To him, rules were sacrosanct, and exceptions were rarely made. Clara took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Sir, I understand the rules, but this is an emergency. I'm willing to take full responsibility if you could just let me board." Mark crossed his arms, his expression unmoved. "I'm sorry, but we can't delay the flight for one passenger. You'll have to rebook." Clara's frustration bubbled to the surface. "Do you know who I am?" Mark raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Ma'am, it doesn't matter who you are. The rules apply to everyone." Clara opened her mouth to respond, but stopped herself. She realized arguing further would only waste more time. Instead, she nodded curtly and stepped away from the gate, her mind racing. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. As she walked away, Mark watched her go, his expression a mix of satisfaction and mild irritation. He had dealt with countless late passengers over the years, and he had little patience for those who thought the rules didn't apply to them. To him, enforcing the rules was a matter of principle, a way to maintain order in an otherwise chaotic environment. But as he turned back to his duties, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There had been something about the woman's demeanor, something that set her apart from the usual late arrivals. She had been calm and composed, even in the face of his stern refusal. and there had been a glint in her eye, a quiet confidence that suggested she was used to being in control. Mark pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. He had a busy day ahead of him, with meetings, inspections, and a mountain of paperwork waiting on his desk. He didn't have time to dwell on a single passenger, no matter how unusual she might have seemed. Meanwhile, Clara found a quiet corner of the terminal and made a series of calls. She rearranged her schedule, ensuring that her meeting in Chicago would still happen, albeit virtually. She also contacted the airline's corporate office, informing them of the delay and requesting a new flight. As she waited for her new flight to be confirmed, Clara couldn't help but reflect on the encounter with Mark. She had been frustrated, yes, but she had also been intrigued. His commitment to the rules was admirable, even if it had been inconvenient for her. She wondered if his rigidity was a strength or a weakness, and whether it was something she could work with or something she would need to challenge. When her new flight was finally confirmed, Clara made her way to the gate, her mind still buzzing with thoughts. She knew that her first day as airport director would be challenging, but she hadn't expected it to start with a confrontation. Still, she was determined to make the best of the situation. As she boarded the plane and settled into her seat, Clara couldn't help but smile. The day had been far from perfect, but it had given her a glimpse into the airport's culture and the people she would be working with. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them head-on. For Mark, the rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and paperwork. But as he sat in his office that evening, reviewing the day's events, his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman at the gate. There had been something about her, something that lingered in his mind. Little did he know their paths would cross again sooner than he expected, and in a way that would change everything. The confrontation at the gate had been a clash of wills, a moment that highlighted the tension between rules and flexibility, authority and empathy. But it was also the beginning of something new, a story that would unfold in ways neither of them could have anticipated. As the plane took off, carrying Clara toward her new life, and as Mark prepared for another day at the airport, neither of them realized that their encounter was just the first chapter in a journey that would transform them both. The confrontation had been a test, a moment that revealed their strengths and weaknesses. But it was also an opportunity, a chance to learn and grow. And as they moved forward, Clara and Mark would discover that sometimes the most challenging situations can lead to the greatest growth. The airport, with its constant motion and endless possibilities, was a place where lives intersected and stories unfolded. And for Clara and Mark, their story was just beginning. The atmosphere in Mark Thompson's office was tense as he sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his senior staff. The morning had been hectic, as usual, with the usual slew of delays, passenger complaints, and operational challenges. Mark prided himself on his ability to handle chaos with a calm demeanor, but today, something felt different. There was an air of anticipation in the room, a quiet buzz that he couldn't quite place. The meeting had just begun when Mark's assistant, a young woman named Lisa, burst into the room. Her face was flushed, and she looked unusually flustered. "Sir, there's someone here to see you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Before Mark could respond, the door swung open, and in walked Clara Bennett. She was dressed impeccably in her navy blue pantsuit, her posture radiating confidence and authority. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He recognized her immediately. It was the woman he had turned away at the gate earlier that morning. Clara stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the room before settling on Mark. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice calm but commanding. "I'm Clara Bennett, your new airport director." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Mark felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead as the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. The woman he had denied boarding to, the one he had dismissed with such finality, was his new boss. His mind raced as he tried to process the situation. How could he have been so blind? Why hadn't he recognized her? Clara's eyes locked onto Mark's, and she gave him a small, knowing smile. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her tone measured, "I believe we've already met." Mark's face turned crimson as he struggled to find the right words. "Director Bennett, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. If I had known." Clara held up a hand, cutting him off. "Let's not dwell on it," he said, her voice firm, but not unkind. "What's done is done. What's important now is how we move forward." The room was thick with tension as Clara took her seat at the head of the table. The senior staff exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to react. Mark, still reeling from the shock, sat down slowly, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on his professionalism, on his ability to enforce the rules without exception. But now, faced with the consequences of his actions, he couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. Clara wasted no time in taking charge of the meeting. She began by outlining her vision for the airport, emphasizing the importance of efficiency, customer service, and adaptability. Her words were clear and concise, her passion for the job evident in every sentence. She spoke about the need for innovation, for finding new ways to streamline operations and improve the passenger experience. As she spoke, Mark found himself increasingly impressed by her leadership. Despite their rocky start, it was clear that Clara was a force to be reckoned with. She had a way of inspiring confidence, of making everyone in the room feel like they were part of something bigger. When the meeting finally came to an end, Clara stood and addressed the group once more. "I'm looking forward to working with all of you," she said, her tone warm but firm. "Together, I believe we can take this airport to new heights." As the staff began to file out of the room, Clara motioned for Mark to stay behind. He felt a knot form in his stomach as he approached her, unsure of what to expect. "Mr. Thompson," Clara began, her voice softer now, "I appreciate your dedication to the rules. It's clear that you take your job seriously, and that's something I respect. But sometimes, a little flexibility can go a long way. I hope we can work together to find a balance between enforcing the rules and understanding the needs of our passengers." Mark nodded, feeling a mix of relief and determination. "You have my full support, Director Bennett," he said, his voice steady. "I'll do whatever it takes to help you succeed." Clara smiled, and for the first time since their encounter at the gate, Mark felt a sense of hope. Despite their initial misunderstanding, he could see that Clara was the kind of leader who brought out the best in people. He was determined to prove himself to her, to show her that he was capable of adapting and growing. As they left the room together, Mark couldn't help but reflect on the morning's events. It had been a humbling experience, one that had forced him to confront his own rigidity and reconsider his approach to leadership. He knew that working with Clara would be a challenge, but it was one he was ready to embrace. For Clara, the morning had been a reminder of the importance of patience and perspective. She had seen firsthand the impact of her new role, and she was determined to lead with empathy and understanding. Together, she and Mark would navigate the complexities of airport management, learning from each other and striving to create a better experience for everyone who passed through their doors. As they walked through the terminal, Clara glanced at her watch and chuckled. "Well, I'd better get going," she said. "I have a flight to catch, and this time, I'll be early." Mark laughed, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but with Clara at the helm, he was confident that they could overcome any obstacle. Together, they were ready to take the airport to new heights. The revelation that Clara Bennett was the new airport director sent ripples through the airport's senior staff. For Mark Thompson, the weight of his mistake hung heavily on his shoulders as he returned to his office after the meeting. He sat at his desk, staring blankly at the pile of paperwork in front of him, his mind replaying the morning's events. He had always prided himself on his ability to enforce the rules without bias, but now he questioned whether his rigidity had blinded him to the bigger picture. Clara, on the other hand, wasted no time in making her presence felt. After the meeting, she spent the rest of the day touring the airport, introducing herself to staff, and observing operations firsthand. She made a point to visit every department, from baggage handling to security to customer service, asking questions, listening to concerns, and taking notes. Her approach was methodical and inclusive, and it didn't take long for her to gain the respect of the airport's employees. By the end of the day, Clara had a clear understanding of the challenges the airport faced. Delays were frequent, passenger complaints were on the rise, and morale among staff was low. She knew that turning things around would require a combination of strategic planning, collaboration, and a shift in culture. But she also knew that she couldn't do it alone. She needed the support of her team, especially Mark, whose experience and dedication were undeniable. The next morning, Clara called Mark into her office. He arrived promptly, his expression a mix of apprehension and determination. "Have a seat, Mark," Clara said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Her tone was calm and professional, but there was a warmth in her eyes that put him at ease. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened yesterday," she began. "I know it was an awkward situation, but I don't want it to define our working relationship. I believe we can learn from it and move forward." Mark nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I appreciate that, Director Bennett, and I want to apologize again for how I handled things. I was just doing my job, but I realize now that I could have been more understanding." Clara leaned back in her chair, studying him thoughtfully. "I understand where you're coming from, Mark. Rules are important, and I respect your commitment to enforcing them. But sometimes, we need to balance rules with empathy. Passengers are often under a lot of stress, and a little flexibility can go a long way in making their experience better." Mark listened intently, his initial defensiveness giving way to genuine curiosity. "I see your point," he said. "But how do we find that balance? How do we know when to bend the rules and when to stand firm?" Clara smiled. "It's not always easy, but it starts with communication and trust. We need to empower our staff to make judgment calls when necessary, and we need to support them when they do. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels valued and heard." The conversation continued for over an hour, with Clara and Mark discussing everything from operational challenges to long-term goals. Clara shared her vision for the airport, emphasizing the importance of innovation, collaboration, and customer satisfaction. Mark, in turn, offered insights from his years of experience, highlighting areas where improvements could be made. By the end of their meeting, Mark felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had been skeptical at first, but Clara's leadership style had won him over. She was firm but fair, ambitious but grounded, and she had a way of making people feel like they were part of something bigger. Over the next few weeks, Clara and Mark worked closely together, their initial misunderstanding becoming a distant memory. Clara's fresh perspective and Mark's experience proved to be a powerful combination, leading to significant improvements in the airport's operations. One of the first changes Clara implemented was a new training program for staff, focused on customer service and conflict resolution. She also introduced a system for tracking and addressing passenger complaints more efficiently, ensuring that issues were resolved quickly and effectively. Mark, for his part, took on a more active role in mentoring junior staff, sharing his knowledge and experience to help them grow. He also became an advocate for Clara's initiatives, using his influence to rally support among the team. The results were almost immediate. Passenger satisfaction scores began to rise, and delays became less frequent. Staff morale improved as employees felt more valued and empowered. The airport, once known for its inefficiencies, was quickly gaining a reputation for excellence. But the changes weren't just operational, they were personal too. Clara and Mark's working relationship evolved into a genuine partnership, built on mutual respect and trust. They challenged each other, learned from each other, and pushed each other to be better. One evening, As they walked through the terminal after a long day, Clara turned to Mark. "You know, that day at the gate, I was frustrated. But I also saw something in you. A commitment to doing what's right. That's a quality I value." Mark smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "Thank you, Director Bennett. I've learned a lot from you as well." As they continued their walk, Clara glanced at her watch and chuckled. "Well, I'd better get going. I have a flight to catch, and this time, I'll be early." Mark laughed, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they were ready to take the airport to new heights. The aftermath of their initial confrontation had been a turning point, not just for Mark and Clara, but for the entire airport. It was a reminder that even the most challenging situations could lead to growth and transformation, and that sometimes the most unexpected connections could lead to the greatest successes. The weeks following Clara Bennett's arrival as the new airport director marked a transformative period for the airport. What had begun as a rocky start between Clara and Mark Thompson had blossomed into a dynamic partnership, one that brought out the best in both of them. Together, they spearheaded a series of initiatives that not only improved the airport's operations, but also revitalized its culture. Clara's leadership style was a breath of fresh air. She was approachable yet decisive, innovative yet grounded. She made it a point to be visible, often walking through the terminal to interact with staff and passengers alike. Her presence was a constant reminder that the airport was more than just a hub for travel. It was a community, one that thrived on collaboration and mutual respect. One of Clara's first major projects was the implementation of a new customer service training program. She believed that the key to improving the passenger experience lay in empowering frontline staff to handle situations with empathy and professionalism. The program, which she developed in collaboration with Mark and a team of trainers, focused on conflict resolution, communication skills, and stress management. The response from staff was overwhelmingly positive. Employees who had once felt undervalued now felt equipped to handle even the most challenging situations. Passenger feedback began to reflect the change, with many noting the improved attitude and efficiency of the airport staff. Mark, who had initially been skeptical of the program, became one of its biggest advocates. He saw firsthand how it transformed not only the way staff interacted with passengers, but also how they interacted with each other. The airport, once plagued by low morale and high turnover, was becoming a place where people wanted to work. But Clara's vision extended beyond customer service. She was determined to modernize the airport's operations, leveraging technology to streamline processes and reduce delays. She introduced a new digital system for tracking baggage, reducing the number of lost or mishandled items. She also implemented a real-time communication platform that allowed staff to coordinate more effectively, ensuring that issues were addressed before they escalated. Mark played a crucial role in these initiatives, using his deep knowledge of the airport's operations to identify areas for improvement. He worked closely with Clara to ensure that the changes were implemented smoothly, often going above and beyond to support her vision. One of their most ambitious projects was the redesign of the airport's check-in and security areas. Clara had noticed that long lines and inefficient layouts were a major source of frustration for passengers. She enlisted the help of a team of designers and engineers to create a more intuitive and user-friendly layout, one that minimized wait times and maximized convenience. The project was a massive undertaking, requiring months of planning and coordination. But the results were worth it. The new layout, which featured self-service kiosks, expanded security lanes, and clear signage, was a hit with passengers. Wait times were cut in half, and the overall flow of the terminal was significantly improved. As the airport continued to evolve, so did Clara and Mark's relationship. What had begun as a professional partnership had grown into a genuine friendship. They often found themselves staying late to discuss new ideas or sharing a meal in the airport's staff cafeteria. One evening, As they sat in Clara's office reviewing the latest passenger satisfaction reports, Mark turned to her with a smile. "You know, I wasn't sure what to expect when you first arrived, but I have to say, you've exceeded all my expectations." Clara laughed. "I could say the same about you, Mark. You've been an incredible partner in all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." Their camaraderie extended beyond the workplace. Clara often invited Mark to join her for coffee or a quick walk during breaks, using the time to bounce ideas off him or simply unwind. Mark, in turn, found himself opening up to Clara in ways he hadn't with anyone else. He shared stories about his early days at the airport, his struggles and triumphs, and his hopes for the future. One day, as they walked through the terminal, Clara turned to Mark. "You know, that day at the gate, I was frustrated, but I also saw something in you, a commitment to doing what's right. That's a quality I value." Mark smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "Thank you, Clara. I've learned a lot from you as well." As the months passed, the airport's transformation became a source of pride for everyone involved. Passenger satisfaction scores reached record highs, and the airport began to receive accolades for its efficiency and customer service. Staff morale was at an all-time high, and the sense of camaraderie among employees was palpable. But perhaps the most significant change was the way Clara and Mark had grown, both as individuals and as leaders. Clara had learned the importance of patience and perspective, while Mark had discovered the value of flexibility and empathy. Together, they had created a culture of collaboration and innovation, one that would continue to drive the airport's success for years to come. One evening, as they stood on the observation deck watching planes take off and land, Clara turned to Mark. "You know, when I first arrived, I wasn't sure what to expect. But now, I can't imagine being anywhere else." Mark nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Neither can I, Clara. Neither can I." As they walked back to the terminal, Clara glanced at her watch and chuckled. "Well, I'd better get going. I have a flight to catch, and this time, I'll be early." Mark laughed, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they were ready to take the airport to new heights. The new beginning they had created was more than just a fresh start. It was a testament to the power of collaboration, resilience, and the belief that even the most challenging situations could lead to growth and transformation. And as they continued to work side by side, Clara and Mark knew that the best was yet to come.